Thank you so much for tuning into No Soundbites Allowed today. I'm the political dragon, Michael Voss. On this podcast, we don't settle for sound bites. We dive deeper, challenge assumptions, and have the conversations that matter. If you liked today's show, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave us your comments. Follow me on the major social media platforms like X, Twitter, YouTube, Rumble, and more to stay updated on upcoming episodes and join the conversation live on our next live stream. We love hearing from you and we value every perspective. We stream live, responding to your chats and calls starting at 2:30 p.m. every Sunday. Stay informed, stay engaged, and as always, don't settle for the sound bites. Thank you so much for tuning into No Soundbites Allowed today. I'm the political dragon, Michael Voss. On this podcast, we don't settle for sound bites. We dive deeper, challenge assumptions, and have the conversation.
And we'll see what happens this evening. It's been a worthy week, that's for sure. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on this week's edition of the Weekly Roundtable. I'm one of your co-hosts and one of the co-founders of the Liberty First Foundation, Frank Everyday People Johnson. To my right is Michael Vasquez, the Dragon of the Southern Tier, New York's only true independent journalist. Would you say you're an investigative journalist as well?
I always go by political commentator, but I do live events. I do investigative journalism. Well, yeah, I do that.
Yeah, because it seems you run the gamut when it comes to your coverage. You do a little bit of everything, and I know, you have some journalists that are just like expose journalists. Some are investigative journalists. Some are just, news readers and stuff like that. You do everything. You're
pretty much one-man team.
Yeah,
they got 10,000 people over at CNN and MSNBC each, and I have me.
Yeah, but you also have credibility. They don't.
Well, that's true. Yeah. Very straightforward, very upfront about my political bias, because every human being has some, but also very much about using credible international sources. CNN, no.
Well,
they make it up as they go.
Well, listen, even though you approach everything and you make your bias known, about your own political beliefs and stuff like that, you still look at everything through a very independent lens, and you're never afraid to call somebody out when they do wrong or when they do right, whether it's the right side of the aisle or the left side of the aisle. You call it right down the middle as far as from a factual standpoint. You have your ideological bent, but it doesn't interfere with how you describe the facts as they are, and not the facts that you wish they were.
No, facts are always facts. And my conclusions, I say this on my show all the time, the facts are the facts. My conclusion you can always disagree with. That's based on my intuition, my knowledge, my experience. That's my conclusion of the facts. Where are they leading us to? And we can have a discussion about where things are going, because that's the future. But we can't dispute about where we are, what has happened, what is going on. No, that's not up for debate. That's just what it is. And you can see many people on the left, CNN, MSNBC, very often, and there's a lot more than that like to reinterpret the reality as it is, because they have their feelings involved, which is sad. Especially look at the week we've just had. It is insane. And we're hearing a lot of people inject a lot of feeling, and mostly at the moment, when we're talking about Israel, Iran, and the U.S. involvement, there has been a massive leap by many people on the left, many people who are into isolationism, to presume facts that don't exist. But we'll get into that as we go on the show.
Well, it is true. I mean, we've seen people from, I've seen a lot of ugliness this week, and from people that I wouldn't necessarily have thought I would see that ugliness from. And I've seen people that I thought would be on one side actually come up to bat and in ways that was surprising to me. And it just goes to show you that when you have a week like this, which has been unprecedented by so many that would say this is a unique week to say the least.
Mm-hmm.
It's I don't know if I would say it's refreshing, but I know that a little bit of upheaval is always good. It tends to, a little bit of disruption in the status quo, as it were, is always a good way to have, shake things up a little bit.
I think you're underestimating the term a little upheaval. Things are rocking and rolling.
What I'm speaking of is like a lot of people on our side of the aisle have come out with statements. I mean, where you're starting to see. All right, I'm just going to call it the way it is. We know that there's a lot of anti-Semitism out there.
Oh yeah, lots of it.
And there are times when you would not necessarily think somebody holds some of those views, but then they reveal themselves, and then you find people that are aligned with people who are openly anti-Semitic with 90% of the views they take, and then all of a sudden they're the one that are coming out as a staunch supporter. So that kind of upheaval is what I'm talking. There's a little bit of realignment where you start to see where those, you may have the left and the right, but you have branches that intersect and cross over. And every now and then, it's refreshing to be able to grab somebody from the other side who has a similar point of view as you and say, okay, we have at least this much common ground, at least this much that we agree on. What else can we potentially agree on in the future? And that's nice to see, even though it's in the most tumultuous of circumstances. Having those little bridges being able to be built here and there, it's always good for long-term relations within our own people.
Yeah, I get that. And by the way, Dal, I see that you joined us. Hey, Dal.
Yes, I was going to give him his own special intro.
Okay.
I was going to segue into Dal visiting us for the first time in like 8 weeks.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. It's been a while.
Yeah, I didn't want people to think that, we completely ignored that he showed up and he's there. It's like, no, trying to find a way to segue him in.
No, I just ran in from work. So, the working man has to pay bills. So you guys don't have.
Boy, the last time we saw you, Dal, you were clean shaven.
Yes.
You got rid of the beard, you were clean shaven, and all of a sudden you're Grizzly Adams again.
I get one, I give one basically week a year to go clean shaven, and then after that it's back to this.
I got on a video call with Pete Soma yesterday, and he's had his Gordon Fisherman look for quite some time now, and I picked up the phone. I called him up, and I didn't recognize the guy looking back at me. It was a face I haven't seen in over a year. Yeah. And he's like, he says, I've decided to shave once a year. He goes, that's the easiest thing for me to do. I just take it off once. They see my face for a few days, and then I look back to where I am. And there he is. And there's Peter Soma in the comment section right now. Hey-oh.
Yeah, see, speak of the devil, and there he shall appear, right, Pete?
True enough. I get what you're saying, though, about what's going on right now in America has actually, I think, been going on since Trump won the election in 2024. We're seeing a lot of, and this is what's frustrated Democrats, their people in the Libertarian Party, the third parties, the Democrats, even some of the progressives, agree with some of the policies and some of the goals of Donald Trump and the Trump administration. It's not so much breaking the parties, but it is factionalizing a lot of it, because people are saying, no, what is it? 62% of America agrees about mass deportations.
Yeah.
Especially when we're talking, and then when we talk about violent illegal aliens, well, that number goes up even higher. It goes to about 72% of Americans agree with that policy. That's including the left. When we're seeing things about trying to have peace around the world, as much as the news media wants to demonize Trump, and we hear lots of people like Dave Smith, who's a libertarian, now coming out and going, "Oh my God, but you didn't have peace." Look, Trump may have overestimated his ability to have peace after the fact as quickly as we had wanted. But we're in the discussions. I mean, he did get the peace in India, Pakistan, which is important. He has been deeply involved in Ukraine, Russia, and they wouldn't even be talking if he wasn't there because they weren't talking to Biden or Kamala or anyone else in the world. Looking at some of the other conflicts that we see going on, we were able to get the living Americans back from Hamas, which the Biden administration, Kamala Harris, couldn't get done. They tried. They failed. Trump got the last living Americans back home. He succeeded. And he's also reinforced several offers of peace. Hamas said no. They don't want to give back the hostages. That's on them. That's not on Trump. So he has been doing a lot. Now we have the new situation, and that could be its own thing. We'll talk about it on its own. But people right now, the media is forgetting, and they're assuming as if we're in the middle of a war, that we are actively in this war. We're not. There is a peace deal on the table. There is talk of, there are negotiations for nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles. Keywords, ballistic missiles. That is the most important part of the deal. It's the problem with Obama and with Biden. Their nuclear deal created the problem we're dealing with right now. And I think that all of that put together is why we're seeing such a weird mix of people who are MAGA, who are leftist, who are Republican and Democrat, third party, that agree, at least in principle, if not in effect, and yet so many others are torn. I think that's because we're seeing things happen. We're seeing the positives. We can see the light at the end of the tunnel. The problem is the world isn't easy to get there. I mean, that's what I'm seeing with most of that. You guys see what I'm saying?
I do. And I think one of the things that we have to acknowledge is the fact that the language plays a real role in a lot of this, because we're seeing different takes and opinions online, and nobody can really agree on definitions. From a liberty standpoint, Israel has every right to defend their sovereignty as a nation and put their big boy pants on and go do what they think they need to do against a country that has habitually and historically said that they want to destroy them and annihilate them. Fine, go ahead, do that. What I also say, though, is America should not be directly involved in any sort of war. And what is the definition of war? So people can't agree. And that's where I think we're seeing a lot of conflict. For me, a definition of war is a protracted, broad battle or prolonged conflict that uses manpower and air power and naval power over a long period of time. So that to me is what a war is. I mean, you look at history, and that's basically what a war is. It's a broad amount of fighting with large amounts of men and ordnance and lots of resources being poured in. Surgical strikes don't count. So if they think that they want to, if the goal is Iran's Ayatollah gets no nukes, and they're making the distinction, the Ayatollah's government should never have nukes. Mm-hmm. They're making that very clear. The Ayatollah's government should never have nukes, and they want to go ahead and drop a Moab on their enrichment station. Okay, I mean, it's not great because there are going to be civilians in there, but they're making every Trump's administration especially is trying to give them every opportunity for the civilians to choose. Are you going to be there and support the Ayatollah, or are you going to leave and maybe survive the coming storm?
Before you answer, Frank, we should note one of the things that's important in this discussion as we go forward. What we're seeing so far, Israel has been relatively pinpoint in their attacks. They're attacking military installations, they're attacking government. They're going after generals, military personnel, scientists directly involved with nuclear missiles, ballistic missiles, government officials, and the facilities, the nuclear facilities, power generation for those nuclear facilities. They're going after infrastructure and government directly tied to their claim of self-preservation. Iran is attacking randomly. They're just attacking people, which reflects the message and the ideology of Iran and the Ayatollah, where this is why they're the greatest sponsor of terror in the world, which gets undersold all the time.
Yeah.
They're attacking random civilians. That's terror. So you have on one side, this is a military conflict, a war, okay, and it's very pinpoint and it's very directed. On the other end, you've got let's kill your people. Not the same thing. These are not equivalent people. Whether people like them or not, it's not equivalent. There are two different types of war that are or conflict that are taking place here. But let Frank go ahead. You want to respond?
Well, one of the things that I said I've been watching is I go to Instagram every now and then. Why? I don't know. I guess I just want to aggravate the hell out of myself for a little while.
Morbid curiosity.
Yeah, and I mean, Instagram is a freak show. It is a freaking freak show, but I like to know what the left is thinking, and that seems to be one of their big playgrounds is Instagram. And I see all of the pro-Hamas crap all over the place all the time. And you see Gaza, leveled, and this is leveled, and this is destroyed, and that's destroyed, and everything else. And we always hear about Israel striking at at Hamas, and why is there so much destruction? Well, that's because Hamas is hiding behind their people in schools and hospitals and apartment buildings and wherever their civilians are. That's where they're launching their weapons from. That's where they're launching the missiles from. That's where the heads of the military operations are. And the civilian casualties for what they are unavoidable. So when Israel goes in and they say, okay, well, this whole block has got 300 of these Hamas guys there. You've got to level it because it's the only way to get them. I feel bad when I know that there's civilian casualties because I know that a lot of the people that are over there don't have the option of getting out, not because they haven't been offered a way out, but because the people of Hamas are holding them there as human shields. They have no way to get away from Hamas. Hamas literally will either keep them in front of you or kill them, if they don't cooperate. And then I see what happens in Iran, and I see these pinpoint strikes. A rocket goes through the wall of an apartment building into the bedroom of a Iranian military leader and hits him while he's in bed, and that's the only damage done. And it was a launch. You hear people say it was a launch from a drone that was launched from inside Iran because Israel can't make a rocket go from Israel to Iran. They just don't have that kind of ability to make it.
But not with that accuracy, no.
Not with that accuracy. And then they talk, and like the planes can't get there and back. They have to refuel somewhere. And refueling planes over the Middle East, if you're an Israeli plane, kind of difficult. So I look at it and I go, how is it one thing it looks like, a scene from Battlefield LA, the movie, when the aliens came in and leveled Los Angeles. And then I turn around and I look and I see what they did in Iran, and they did less damage than the protesters on No King Day, to get that particular guy. And say, well, how is it possible you have that glaring a difference between the effectiveness of your military? I don't necessarily know why the same technology can't be brought to bear in the Middle East, where Hamas is, as opposed to where it's being used against Iran. Now, maybe it's a matter of money. Maybe it's a matter of, well, it's just easier to carpet bomb and blanket, an entire neighborhood, with inexpensive dummy bombs than it is to have a multi-million-dollar smart bomb get shot through a crack in the siding of an apartment building. I don't know if it's that, or how much of the destruction that we see in Gaza is being caused by Hamas themselves to try and paint Israel as a bigger villain than what the rest of the Middle East actually thinks they are.
There's a few things to that.
The fog of war will never give you the answers that you're looking for in terms of the Gaza and the Iran. But there is one thing to keep in mind. From what we know about the attacks in Iran, they were planned for years. So the difference between what happens in Gaza and what happens in Iran really comes down to planning. The stuff that happens in Gaza is reactionary in the sense that October 7th happens, and there are like pre-made plans and drills and stuff that go into action for some of it. But because Hamas is so close, steamrolling the entire place to squash all the cockroaches is basically what they've resorted to, because it's quick, it's easy, and it's reactionary. Whereas the strikes that are happening in Iran, they were planned for a very long time, almost as long as the beeper bombs.
Well, I can see that, but if you're going after facilities, but
Right.
when you're taking out an individual, some guy in his bedroom,
Right.
that's some pretty goddamn precise hit.
That is, and it's a lot of it has to do with their intelligence gathering. Like when Mossad operates inside of Iran, and they've been shadowing this guy and learning his habits for months, almost years. So they know where he is, and they can hit him at any time. And the reason they're doing it now and so openly and so precisely is because it sends a message. You could be sleeping in your home, and we will nail you in your bed. And it's not just for the Israelis either. It's also for the Persians. People don't realize that Iran is made up of many different types of people, and they're not all Islamicists. Some of them are still traditional Persians that still want to have their prince back and want to have Persia be great again. The only problem is that the Islamicists are so violent, and they're able to corral the people with all the weaponry, and they hold basically a stranglehold on infrastructure that the Persians themselves have never effectively had any sort of resistance against the Ayatollah.
Well, I think that's true, but I think there's a different element in that you're looking at, first of all, they're two entirely different conflicts. And one of the first things and this is the problem of CNN, MSNBC, this is the new U.S. leftist media. They conflate both of these events. I don't know what Frank's doing there, but both of these wars are entirely different on multiple levels.
Yeah.
The goal of these two conflicts are entirely different. In terms of what you're seeing with Gaza, you're looking at one, creation of a buffer zone. That's very important to Israel. They want to create a buffer zone so that gives some separation, some defense against future actions by Hamas, a terrorist organization. So there's one, that's part of it. Two, there's many decades of damage that has never been resolved because Hamas doesn't care about infrastructure. They care about having a military to be able to attack Israel. That's all they care about. That's why most of or a good part of all humanitarian aid that comes into Gaza goes directly to, either by force or by accident, goes directly to Hamas and its military fighters. So they purposefully leave their people starving. They leave the infrastructure unresolved because that would take away from their military operations, their terrorist actions.
It's also good leverage. You want to eat? you fight with us. You don't. If you want medicine, you fight with us. You want your family to continue to survive, you fight with us. We have all the aid.
Right. All right. And so you're looking at a very different scenario there. And then there's also the reality of at any given moment, you could have whatever plan you want, but as the saying goes, every plan in war ends the moment the first shot is fired. And it's true. Now, I'm not saying that Israel is without critique. Any government, anyone in a war can be critiqued. And there's no such thing as war crimes until after the war is done. Right. After the war is done and someone has become the winner and the loser, whoever loses gets all the war crimes. That happens every time. That's just the fact of the world. So in the middle of this, someone saying, oh, it's a war crime to do this or that, that's just propaganda. It means nothing. It's a war. It's fighting. That's just what's going to happen. That's just the reality. Both sides are doing it. Doesn't matter. And the goal, of course, is Israel, besides having the buffer, besides destroying Hamas, a terrorist organization right next door to them that has promised and effectively keeps trying to genocide all of the people of Israel. You also have the fact of the hostages, which Hamas refuses to return, which every nation in the world has guaranteed that if Hamas returns the hostages, they will have peace. And Hamas refuses. And that gets underreported and under-discussed over and over again. So that's one conflict. What we're talking about here with Iran and Israel, very different goals. Yeah, we have a lot of Mossad that's been infiltrating, and they've been able to get the data on where these individuals are, what are the weak points, because it's about it's very much about Iran can't have a nuke. No one, not Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, no one in the Middle East, no one in Europe, no one in the world trusts Iran with a nuclear weapon. And I've heard a lot of the isolationists out there, a lot of the people who are against any and all forms of war, they're essentially pacifists. A lot of people are screaming about, oh my God, there's a war going on. This is the world. This is the reality.
Well, that's exactly why I talk about definitions. Like the people that are saying no military involvement, no way, no how, not ever. If America has interest in Iran not having a nuke, it's very different to blow up their enrichment center once with something really, really large and beat them down with that stick once, than to ship in wave after wave of troops and planes and bombs and have American boots on the ground and institute a draft and have that. That's war. This is not war. This is enforcement of an interest against a regime, specifically the regime that historically has demonstrated they have no problem infiltrating different areas, agitating to cause violence, and if they had the ability to take that enriched uranium, I doubt very much they would put it in a missile. They wouldn't be like North Korea. What they would do is they would probably make smaller arms and then proliferate them out through their proxies to do as much damage as possible.
The dirty bomb fear. I don't think that's what they would do. And again, now we're talking about what are the military strategies, what are the goals and directives of Iran.
I mean, we can speculate all we want. There's really no evidence for that. But what I would say though is, historically, their behavior has always leaned towards they would rather fund terrorism and do damage than to actually do trade or some sort of peaceful negotiation. Their regime is not about that. Their regime is about you totally submit to us or you die. That is their regime. They even use it against their own people. So their own people have been living dual lives in many cases where they submit, they act like they submit totally, but there's been videos and feeds and stuff with Persians that have been running away from Tehran. They've been evacuating like Trump on Trump's advice. And there was one point where the traffic got clogged up in a tunnel and all of a sudden someone started playing ethnic music for like Persian music, and they all started dancing and saying "Death to the Ayatollah." Now that could be propaganda, but at the same time, it shows even that there's somebody willing to make that propaganda in a tunnel from a cell phone to demonstrate that not everybody is a monolith in Iran, and they all want this.
Yeah, but
and that's the same all over.
Yeah, but there's another problem. That's confused, and this is again coming from the left here in America. There's this movement. We confuse the people and the government. Wars aren't fought by people. Wars are fought by governments. People do the fighting. Governments are the ones that start and end wars.
Right.
This isn't about the people. I know there are many. We've heard about the Green Movement in Iran under Obama, who were abandoned. There have been several movements to try and overthrow the Ayatollah. They have all failed since 1980. That I don't doubt exists. That's true. But that's not the government, and that's not the ones who are leading the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, the greatest source of terrorist sponsorship in the world. That's Iran's government. That's what we're seeing now in their retaliation against Israel. They're attacking civilians, not infrastructure. There is a certain mentality, and this is what the conflict's about. Now, the United States, we are being told by the mainstream news media and individuals like Dave Smith and many others who are saying, well, America's in a war. We're not.
Yeah.
We could become part of a war. We're not in it. The fact that Israel is doing this and America knows some of the details isn't America being in a war.
Right.
Obviously, our allies will tell us what they are doing because that could interfere with things that we're doing, and we're the big dog on the hill. But that doesn't mean, but Israel is its own country. They do their own thing.
Right.
Whether people recognize that or want to recognize that or not, doesn't matter. But it sells better to say, this is all Trump. He's betraying people. No. Everything we have seen in the Trump administration, both his first term and this term, tells us that Trump is trying and has been trying to increase the amount of peace, not just in the Middle East, but around the world. I have no doubt that he legitimately was trying to get a peace deal. Why did this happen now? Well, in part, yes, it's a perfect time. Hamas has been basically crushed. Hezbollah has been beaten. The Houthis have been beaten. All the proxies that Iran uses to fight instead of themselves have all been basically knocked out. They're useless. Iran is on its own. And Iran has internal problems, which they've always had, but they are continuing to build. And no one wants them to have nuclear weapons, and they have no real friends in the Middle East. Russia is busy with the Ukraine, so they're not getting the support, military support, that they would need. China has nothing to do with this. They're busy in Southeast Asia, preparing for a Japan that has a military, trying to pressure South Korea, trying to pressure the Philippines. They're busy. So Iran's on its own. It hasn't really had that problem or had to deal with that in a couple of decades. That's the thing. So if the United States, and the United States is not without critique, I'll say, I don't agree with Donald Trump when he said it must be unconditional surrender. Because that means, let's think of it from Sun Tzu, you're on deadly ground. Troops on deadly ground only have two choices. Really, they only have one choice: fight and die. You fight and die, and either you wind up winning or you're dead. You have no other choice because you're on deadly ground. This is Sun Tzu. It goes back 3,000 years. And that's where, and telling Iran they have to make an unconditional surrender, that puts them on deadly ground, and they have no choice but to fight until the end. So I think Trump was wrong in saying that. I think he's right to say no nukes, and I think he's right to say you don't get to develop ICBMs, ballistic missiles, any further than Obama has already allowed you to do, any further than Biden has allowed you to do. That program ends right now. I think that's absolutely essential to the safety of the United States and the rest of the world. So he's not without critique either. The question is, do we go in with troops? And my answer to that, my ultimate reasoning on that, and I'll stop my diatribe right here, is real simple. I said this about Afghanistan, Iraq, all the conflicts. If we are not willing to take control of the land that we win, nor are we willing to even try. If we're willing, if every troop that goes over there, if they don't get to own the land they stand on and they control, then it is not a war we should be in.
Yeah.
If we're going to fight, we must control what we fight over. And if we can't do that, it's not a war to be in. But I'll let you guys react. I had a whole bunch there. So,
Frank?
Yeah, you did have a whole bunch there.
well, it's a
Would
lot
you
of
like-
background. There's a lot going on.
What do you think, Frank? You want to own a piece of Iran?
Actually, no, I don't. Not in its current configuration. If you asked me if I would want to own a piece of Iran circa 1977, yeah, I would probably want to have a piece of Iran 1977. Women were walking around in short skirts and low-cut tops, and they were having fun, and they listening to disco music and enjoying themselves, driving brand new cars, going to school, having jobs, having families. Everybody looked good, was happy, was doing just fine. That's the Iran that I wouldn't mind grabbing a piece of. And then we had the Ayatollah.
Yep.
You know, and the fact is, I think what a lot of people I think are missing right now is we have a 3-year window to get things done right now.
Right.
Because we don't know what the next presidential election is going to bring. And if you want to actually look at it the other way, we have a 1.5-year window because we don't know what's going to happen when the congressional elections come up. You remember, I mean, that can flip every 2 years. The Senate's going to, can go a different way. So right now, while Trump has got at least a manageable majority that he can actually get things done with, and he has the agenda, even though he has the moratorium set by the people, we know we can't trust elections. We can't trust the way things go. So we have to look and say, okay, what window of opportunity do we have for him to get things done? He's got to now focus on dealing with 25 different partners around the world as towards the best way to go, because every one of them wants what's best for them, not what's best for us or what's best for the world. You have a lot of people out there who've got a lot of just self-interest, not world interest, and sure as shit, not our interest. What they have to understand is what's good for the United States generally turns out to be good for everybody because we're the big dog in the room. If our economy booms, other countries' economies are going to boom. If we have peace, odds are they're going to have peace. If we're running things the right way and trade is good and the economy is good, there's a lot of stability. Everybody benefits from it. That rising tide and all boat things is not just in your own country.
Right.
That's global. We've got the biggest boat in the water. If we have smooth sailing, everybody else will, but we only have a limited window in which to do things. And all of these people are like, well, Trump said he was going to keep us out of the war. So, like, dude, it's been 3 days. It's been 3 days that they started doing some shit. We haven't had a troop committed anywhere. We haven't had a bill. We haven't had an edict. We haven't had anything. All Trump has said is there's some plans that are ready to go in the event of. You have to have these contingency plans. Most of these plans were in effect before Trump even got there from his last administration. These are things that they took into consideration because everybody knows that Israel has been up against the clock and the clock ran out. They had to act now or they would never be able to turn those hands of time back. We might not like what Israel did. We might not agree with it. We might think that they had more time, but you know what? They're the first responder in their own neighborhood. They have a better sense of what's going on over there on the pulse of that region than we do. And if they're the ones who are going to get struck first, it behooves them to protect themselves in any way, shape, or form. They have to do what they need to do. They're not going to wait to get hit, have half their population wiped out by a dirty bomb or by a small nuke, and then turn to America and go, hey, can we punch back now? You know, it doesn't work that way.
No,
you
and
know,
I wouldn't expect them to do that.
If somebody's breaking into my house and they're intending on doing me harm, I'm not going to call the cops and wait for them and tell Lori, hey, listen, if they come in and they kill me, then you can shoot them.
Yeah.
Because that's basically what's happening. Everybody wants to look at us for the directive. You know, we can only do so much as far as global stability. There are still little isolated sections of the world, and believe me, don't think for a second. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, every other country in the Middle East that you can think of, don't think for a second they're not all breathing a sigh of relief right now.
Well, many of them fought Israel. Excuse me, Iran. They've been in wars with Iran. They don't like Iran.
They're all. Boy, I can't go on TV and say I agree with Israel, but man, I'm glad they struck. There's a lot of that shit going on right now because they know damn well Iran doesn't look at they don't look at Iran as being that's their only country. They want a caliphate.
Yeah.
Their whole thing is global domination. Iranians don't have any love for the Saudi royal family. They don't have any love for the Sultan of Brunei. They don't have any love for the new government in Iraq or Afghanistan or anywhere else. They want to burn all of these people to the ground and take everything over. The fact that Israel went over and did what they did, alleviates a lot of the weight off of these people. They can come out in public and go, we don't agree with what they did. These are our Islamic brothers and sisters. Well, so are the ones in Gaza that you don't want to take in as refugees.
Right.
You don't want to take those Egypt. Hey, Egypt, aren't those your people? Saudi, aren't those your people? You don't want to take them, but you'll condemn Israel for protecting itself. It's all bluster. It's bluster. Because the one thing about all of these countries that they all have in common is that power rests on the head of a pin. In every one of these countries, power rests on the head of a pin. And all it's going to take is for the people over there to revolt enough and be willing to say, you know what? Instead of me waiting for the long kiss goodnight, I'm willing to go to sleep today and fight back and throw these governments over. We've already seen footage from Iran 2 hours after the strikes. They have riots in the street, people looking to overthrow the government. The Ayatollah 4 minutes ago, they reported in Iran the Ayatollah is heading for a bunker. He's going into hiding. Yep. Well, where's your bravery? You know, where's your bravery? You're going to talk about, well, you're the great fighter. You're fighting for this. You're fighting for that. But you're going to go run in a bunker.
Well, I can't blame him too much for that. I mean, both Trump and Israel we now know that Israel, Mossad, wanted to assassinate him. Trump has said, yeah, he initially said no, and now he said, well, it's not the worst idea possible. I think it is, by the way. That turns him into a martyr, makes it a religious war, and that would be bad.
I would think it would be better for the people to actually capture the Ayatollah.
Well, if they kill him, it's fine, but we can't.
Right. But the problem is, until you root out the entirety of the government, there's 50 more bearded guys with glasses and turbans waiting to take that guy's place. There's 50 of them in line right now, and it's funny how they all look exactly the same.
Yeah.
Hey, left.
I won't go there with that.
Hey, leftists. How come there's no diversity in Iranian politics?
Yeah.
Where are the women? Where are the women in the Iranian power structure? Where are the where are the African Iranians? Where are the Hispanic Iranians? Where are the Asian Iranians?
Stoned to death.
Where's your DEI candidates over there? Oh, that's right. I forgot.
Thrown off a cliff.
They don't have any of that. They don't have any DEI over there. They have DIE, die, because that's what they do when somebody challenges them. They friggin' die.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a first world luxury. You know, to have DEI and intersectionality, that's a first world luxury. When you have the quality of life at the pinnacle of the world, when you're in the leading nation in the world, and you're safe from pretty much everything.
When you're wearing Levi's, Nikes, you're walking around with a shirt that says logging for polo or this and that, and you got your AirPods in, and your iPhone in your hand, and your MacBook in your Gucci bag, and all the rest of that, and you're bitching about capitalism. Shut up.
Yeah. And to go back a little bit when we're talking about like what does this mean for the American public? Like what are we seeing? And it's like, well, why should we care about what happens in Iran? And really, the only thing the only reason that we have to care as John Q. Public about Iran is national security, insofar as they just want to kill us. We really have no dog in this fight. This is entirely Israel's game. Let them go. Let them do it. We won't do anything special, not super special, unless they can actually prove to us that Iran actually has a nuke. And the nuke, the enriched uranium that they could use, they only need the raw material. We don't need to wait for them to actually build a bomb. They were at 60%. 3 years ago?
No, they've been
8 years ago
for a long time.
So, and if they don't have enough, they're very close. And they haven't used it. Up until this point, they've always said, we have it, we're going to use it, we will get it, no matter what happens. These weak administrations in the U.S. can't stop us. We're going to keep doing it, we're going to keep doing it. We have stopped them. We've slowed them down to a point, or else they would have had it already, and they would have used it.
Well, let me clarify. One, the Ayatollah has never said that he wants to use nukes. In fact, he said the exact opposite. But the president of Iran and many people in the IRGC and many of his generals have said, yes, they do want to use nukes. So there is a difference there. And it's Israel that has held them back, because this is not the first time that Israel has assassinated various individuals, scientists in the nuclear program, many generals, and many members of the IRGC and many of the ballistic missile scientists. And they've done that consistently with the goal of knock back Iran by a couple of years, if not a decade or two, to prevent them from getting to cross the line. So I just wanted to clarify, there is that little difference there, and it's not the United States that has stopped Iran. It's Israel. And everyone in the world is happy that they did. They get yelled at, and this is last time was about 5 years ago that Israel went in and blew up some of the scientists, and everyone screamed and was like, oh my God, blah, blah, blah. And then everyone let it go.
Yeah.
The reason, but what happened at that case, the last time, was Iran had all of their proxies, and they all attacked Israel instead of Iran. Now they don't have their proxies, so that's why they have to directly attack. So there is that difference there, but this isn't a new scenario.
No,
by and large.
And even Trump's reaction, like dropping. If there's a plan to again hit the enrichment base, it is an installation compared to what he did with Soleimani. And why did he do that? Why did he go after Soleimani? Because Soleimani was one of the coordinators for all the proxies that were committing terror against the world, not just the United States, but the world. So hitting this installation is just like killing Soleimani. It's a precise strike. It doesn't mean that we're going to war. It doesn't mean that we're going to be in a protracted battle. Again, protracted. It's like Frank says. It's been 3 days. 3 days. We haven't done anything.
6 days.
6 days. But either way, America doesn't have to invest themselves totally into this fight. This is not where we need to be. We just step out of Israel's way and be like, look, we'll talk to the other nations and we'll make sure that they stay off your back. But you do what you feel you need to do. We will tell you if you go too far, but you're a big boy. You can handle the consequences on your own. Go do it.
Hey, Mr. Miyagi didn't step onto the mat and fight Daniel's fight for him. He just gave him the tools to win.
Right.
He told him, this is what you got to do, and that's the end of that.
Wax on, wax off.
Daniel still took a hell of a beating, but he came out on top at the end of it. Even though it was an illegal kick to the face, still, he got the trophy.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we got to be Mr. Miyagi. We just got to be like, look, you bought tools from us. Here you go. Have fun, I guess. Don't go too crazy. We'll see on the other side.
All right, this is way off topic, but speaking of Mr. Miyagi, the great, late Pat Morita.
Yes.
They have that Karate Kid Legends movie that's out there, right? And you got Daniel LaRusso.
Yeah, you're way into like a whole new thing. Okay.
I know. Well, I have to bring this up because Miyagi showed up, so I have to give credence to Miyagi. They got this Jackie Chan. He's in the movie with what's Ralph Macchio, and they're both gonna sensei this one kid who's gonna fight, right?
Okay.
They did a flashback scene. Part of it is that the Jackie Chan character comes to California to learn things from Ralph Macchio's character that Mr. Miyagi taught him that he never learned from Mr. Miyagi. And they do a flashback, with an actor that they had to use as a stand-in for Pat Morita.
Oh.
Okay. I have never in my life seen somebody look so exactly like somebody else.
Really?
This guy, he is this actor. He's just unaffiliated. He's an Asian actor. I don't know his name. Much younger than Pat Morita was at the time. And all they did is they put the goatee on him and they made the hair stick out on the side of his head or whatever like that. And he just he squished his face a little bit like Pat Morita used to do, and looks exactly like Pat Morita. And they have all of these still photos and everything from behind the scenes. And then they cut the scene out of the movie.
Oh.
So now I don't even want to go see the movie because I'm going to be disappointed that I don't get to see what in essence is the ghost of Pat Morita come back from the dead.
The spiritual successor.
Yeah, the return of Mr. Miyagi.
Oh, that sucks.
Okay.
Hey, listen, I wasn't going to
say it.
Listen, you can go on about your Godzilla movies for hours and on end and talk about all your other.
The old movies were great, not the new ones.
No,
the old ones were great.
Well, listen, I
told you, here comes Godzilla.
No, this one you mentioned Dragon Ball Z or whatever the hell it is, Pokemon. Vass, who's older than I am, knows everything there is to know about this crap, and he rolls his eyes if I bring up Mr. Miyagi.
Yes,
Pat Morita's a goddamn legend.
90 million people around the world watch just the old Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. Everybody knows who Vegeta is because he rocks. And do you know what?
I guarantee you,
legends.
I guarantee you, if you ask how many people, 90 million, you said, I bet you if you ask 100 million people, if you told 100 people wax on, they would reply wax off.
Nowhere even close.
So I have to double check this, but I think Pat Morita was part of the 442. Fat Electrician recently did a whole show about the 442, which was the Go for Broke regiment in World War II. So I'll have to double check that because that was actually pretty cool. They were talking about Mr. Miyagi when he's in the movie and he has that photo of him serving with as a war hero. Those were his buddies from the 442. I thought that was cool.
Yes, he was part of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team.
Yeah.
but he was not I'm just doing a quick search right now.
Right.
He was not a combat veteran,
No.
which is surprising to me. But that was his regiment.
They call
He
it, I
was
think
a
they call it
sergeant.
the Nisai Brigade or whatever.
Don't know. Again, I just pulled up.
Anyway, the big thing about the 442nd was that they were comprised almost entirely of sons of people that were in Japanese internment camps. So they were Japanese Americans that fought for America in Italy and other parts of Europe, and they were a kick-ass regiment, and they are highly decorated.
All right, you see the guy on the screen?
Yes, that's Mr. Miyagi.
Yeah,
No,
that's
the guy who
That's
played.
the guy. Holy
That's
shit!
the actor they brought in to replace to do the scene with. That's
Wow.
part of the scene that they cut.
good job.
That
You
is
did a good job of
fantastic.
recreating him.
Is that amazing? And there's no CGI. All this was the addition of the goatee and the mustache and the white tufts of hair on the side of the head, and then the guy contorted his facial
The
expression.
nose is wrong. Well, now that I'm looking at it, the nose is wrong. That's the only thing that.
Yeah, but
like,
you know what?
visibly- And I
Even-
didn't even notice it at first.
Even with the nose though, like as soon as you brought that photo up, it looked like Mr. Miyagi from right out the gate.
Oh yeah. I thought it was
But
Miyagi.
this is what he looks like hold on, without the makeup.
Right.
That's what he looks like without the makeup. But for the fact that you can get that close, to
That's phenomenal.
to an iconic face. I
Yeah.
mean, Pat Morita's face, that's iconic. He's everybody in the world recognizes Pat Morita's face. To get somebody that close to it, and then to do the unthinkable and cut the scene from the movie.
Yeah. That'd be major nostalgia bait. I'm surprised they made that call and edited that out. They're gonna put it. They're definitely gonna put it in the deleted scenes, like bonus disc or whatever. But
Yeah.
that's unfortunate because that would have been a huge homage to him.
Yeah.
That's a shame.
Okay.
And by the way, for those of you who've never seen it, you know how Pat Morita got his start in entertainment?
No.
He started well before Happy Days. Didn't he start in internment camps?
Pat Morita was a stand-up comedian.
Oh, really? I didn't know he did stand up.
Pat Morita was a stand-up comedian back in the 1950s.
Wow.
After the war, 1950s and 1960s. And there's a quick story about Pat Morita that you might find funny. Pat Morita was the first person who ever gave Pat Morita a job opening for him was Red Fox
Really?
from Sanford and Son.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Red Fox, who most people associate as being African American. He was actually Native American and African American.
Right.
He was Red Fox. He was Cherokee, and he wanted to make sure that because he found Pat Morita's act hysterical because he was clean. Red Fox was as filthy as you could possibly get. He made Richard Pryor blush. Well, at one point, Pat Morita, before he actually got his start, was saying that he was going to wind up losing his house and stuff like that. And Red Fox came over and said, "Well, what do you need?" And Pat Morita said, "I need like $5,000 to pay the loan off," because at the time the banks were trying to close on him. They were taking advantage of the fact that he was Asian. Right. There was a lot of racist bullshit going on with minorities not being able to keep loans. Banks were always trying to renegotiate stuff on them and chase them out of properties if the white neighbors didn't want them there. Red Fox just wrote him a check. There
Wow.
you go. And gave him a check. And 6 months later, Pat Morita came back to pay him the check. And Red Fox said, "Next time somebody need help, you go help him."
Oh, pay it forward. Yeah.
10 years later, Pat Morita is doing stand-up at a comedy. He's a headline comedian. He gives a young up-and-coming comedian his first big break, Robin Williams.
Really?
And
Wow.
Pat Morita took the money that Red Fox was that he owed Red Fox and gave it to Robin Williams to pay for his apartment for the year, so he could continue his career doing stand up because he thought he was that funny.
Wow.
So when you look at that, there is some of those guys that when you think about entertainment and how we all hate actors and actresses and you're all the center, there are some out there that really do nice things for other people and try to and you'll never hear these stories until 30 years after they're dead.
That's kind of like with Dave Chappelle, right? So Dave Chappelle is very active in his community, and he's one that's been working on like housing and stuff. Dave Chappelle's one. He doesn't try to pull up the ladder behind him based on his success.
No, but
who's
you
another
get
one?
guys
Well,
like
he had
him,
an epiphany when he went to Africa, and he had the Chappelle show, and he was very popular. And then they were trying to take over the show. The networks were trying to take it from him.
Yeah,
and he went to Africa instead.
Yeah, he was 3 hours from me.
Yeah, he changed a lot after that trip, which is why he took it. He did a bunch of soul searching, changed his view on a lot of things.
He was living in Durban. He was living in Durban the same time that I was in Johannesburg. He was 3 hours away from me. Okay. So we went down to the coast at one point. And I could have swore I saw him. And I was like, "Yo, Dave!"
Well, there are some of these guys that really do a lot of good things, like Shaquille O'Neal.
Yeah.
If you're ever in a restaurant, Shaquille O'Neal happens to be eating there, you're not going to pay for your food. You know, if you're ever shopping at Walmart or something like that, and Shaquille O'Neal walks in there, he's going to buy your kid a bicycle. If you're down at Shaquille O'Neal is one of those guys who just helps everybody that he can all the time. Every time he goes out, he tries to help at least one person with every outing. Another guy that you never hear anything bad about, but you'll always hear the little stories, is like Keanu Reeves.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Always doing good. He's a really down-to-earth, normal type of guy, and he's very caring, very giving. And, you know, and these are people that you don't ever hear them talk. They don't ever get in. This is a lesson to Hollywood. You don't have to get involved with your politics and open up your big mouth. Just be a good person, and people will care about you as a person and not you as the character. They will care about who you are and not hate you for it. And speaking of people that I can't stand, who made a good point, oddly enough, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
Did you see him on The View yesterday?
Yeah, when he's talking about immigrants, he was talking about immigration and how immigrants, when you go to a foreign country, really need to treat that trip as being a guest. You are a guest in somebody else's home.
Of course.
And you can't be doing these things like what you're seeing in LA, where you're waving like the national flags of your home country and everything else, and expect to be respected or well liked in the place that you're currently living.
Those aren't immigrants, and they're not.
No, they're not.
Holders.
But he also
criminals.
Right, but he also came out very strongly against illegal immigration. He came out strongly in favor of the mass deportations. He came out, and it must have hurt him a lot to come out and agree with Trump on something after he's been badmouthing him for the last 8 years.
Not only that, during COVID, he was also one of the more vocal people.
Screw your freedom.
Screw your freedoms. Oh, yeah.
But I think he may have noticed that his last 3 movies went straight to video and nobody gives a shit, and he might be going on. Maybe I better get back to on the part where people like me again.
What do you mean? There's no VHS anymore? Straight to VHS, and there's no VHS.
He's playing the political game. He's playing popularity. That's where the public is, I think, based on his more recent political statements.
Yeah.
By the way, since we were on completely sidetracked, let's go with, did you know the character Red Fox, his character on the TV show Sanford and Son? For most of the people who are way too young, don't know any of this stuff. Most of the people on the internet, it was a TV show back in the 70s. Red Fox, black comedian, really well known, got a shot. He got on TV. Yes, black people were on TV and starring in their own programs, even in the 70s. Diversity is not a
new concept.
Not from the 2020s. It's been here
Right.
for a while. And did you know what his real name is? Red Fox?
Fox Red.
No. Fred Sanford.
Fred Sanford.
That's his real name.
Huh.
The character he played on TV is in fact his real name,
Right.
which a lot of people didn't know that's his actual name. So it's kind of interesting. That being said, okay, so you completely threw me off because we were talking about Iran.
Well, listen.
It's fine.
Listen. We get so deep and so serious into the woods for so long. We don't spend a lot of time just having fun anymore. I think it's high time we start having a little fun every now and then, rather than trying to solve the world's ills every week. We should talk about a couple of good things, some things that uplift our spirits, some things that people like me give a shit about. For instance, in the big beautiful bill, which may actually have a good chance of passing. The Hearing Protection Act has been rolled into it, and so suppressors will be coming off the NFA. You know what else is rolled into it? Short-barreled rifles and shotguns. So if you have an SBR or want to have an SBR, when it gets rolled into the big beautiful bill and that passes through the House and Senate and Trump signs it into law, for the first time since 1968, short-barreled rifles and shotguns and suppressors will no longer be under the purview of the ATF. They will be removed. They will no longer be regulated items. They will be something that you can buy and you can own without having to give the government $200 to exercise your freedoms, along with an additional background check, because God knows you already have had enough of them. So that's a very good thing. Very, very good thing.
Yeah, I'd be happy about that. But I don't know that the big beautiful bill, which is HR 1, it's our funding resolution. I don't think it's going to actually get through as it exists. Too many poison pills attached to it. When I say that, folks, it means that there are people who did amendments to the bill, and that's where you usually see all the bridge to nowhere, shrimp on a treadmill, that kind of wasteful spending. Yeah, that's all comes from amendments attached to the bill, which are called poison pills.
Well, at least those two provisions are provisions that nobody on the right side, the people that are going to want to vote for this bill, are going to look to use as a negotiation tool. Well, we'll take SBRs off in favor of this. Everybody's pretty staunch about getting some of that out of the control of the ATF. Now, I personally don't understand why it has to be in a law to take that out of control of the ATF when the ATF is that just a, what do you call it? Regulatory body?
Yeah, it's supposed to not interpret regulations, but to enforce regulations. It's a regulatory enforcement body.
That's the idea. That's not what they are now.
No, that's not how they behave. That's not how they behave now, but that's what they were originally created for.
Yeah.
But if they use a law to take that out of the NFA now, then there is no law to enforce, and the ATF is essentially toothless. And that's what they're looking for. It's a step towards abolishing the ATF entirely, but what they really shouldn't do is take the people that generally are in the ATF and put them in the DEA, because instead of doing gun busts now, they will do drug busts in the name of doing gun busts. And they'll just use the same tactics in the DEA that they did in the ATF. So protect your dogs.
Yeah, there's two big differences. There's establishment government, which is trying to maintain as much of the government as they can, because they like to kick the can down the road. They like everything that's been going on for the last several centuries. Yeah. The spending and all that. They don't want that to change. And then you've got the far smaller wings, both of the left and the right, that do want change, except the left wants change to go more socialist, and then you've got MAGA, which wants to get very much more constitutional.
Right.
So you've got but the biggest part of government is the establishment that just want the status quo. They don't want to make any of the changes, which is why they attack Trump so much, which is why they attack MAGA so much,
Right.
because they don't want any change. They like the corruption that has been existing for decades.
Well, and that's because they are the ones that have maintained the power the longest through this. And this is for going for Democrat and Republican parties both.
Right.
I mean, and the Libertarians, the irony behind the Libertarian Party is that they want to play the game, but somehow they also want to find the way to separate themselves from the game and say, we want to play the game, but we don't want to play by the rules of the game. But then they end up playing by those rules anyway, and their party never gets off the ground. So that's why when I wasn't sad to see the Libertarian Party of New York go, when New York decided to only allow 2 major political parties in their elections. I think everybody should have a voice, and people should be able to represent themselves based on whatever they want. But when I was a registered libertarian, we really had no home to speak of. I mean, Larry Sharp does a really good job, and he really carries the torch for the libertarians of New York. In fact, I tried to vote for him twice. Tried to vote for him twice, but there is no cohesive libertarian party per se, because no one can really agree on what it is that Liberty First stands for, not in the way that we would understand it. That's the irony. It's like, you're libertarians, you should be strictly Liberty First, which means that you have property rights. Well, that we want open borders for freedom of association. Well, you can't have property rights if you don't have borders. So how does that work? Like, there's a whole bunch of semantics in there that they have to get right if they're going to be a major political party. I would much prefer to have Americans be Americans, no party affiliation, and just listen to you.
I would like that, but
well, yeah, no, but you know what I mean. Like, you get the information from all different sources, and you come to your own conclusion through discussion and reflection. That's the way we should be operating, and the people should be able to govern that way.
But there's no money in that. There's no money. We have a system that's already in place that is built on. I mean, look at Cuomo's race. You can see that it's about the grift. It's about getting some of that money. Yeah. That's what the New York mayor's race. That's all that's about.
And it makes me mad to no end to watch Hochul sit there and talk about how these guys are playing games with their candidacies by going in and taunting the federal bear. And then they're like, when they get arrested for it, she's like, "Oh, that's bullshit." You know what's bullshit is the fact that you think that you went out on a No Kings protest day and acted like an empress.
Well,
that's bullshit.
Okay. Well, before we get to the No Kings, because I got something on that.
Yeah.
But going back to the Libertarian Party, the one thing I'm upset about, and especially the Libertarian Party of New York, and I am a Republican, I am conservative, they didn't deserve to be kicked out like they were. New York State screwed them. They broke the law to kick them and all third parties out, except for the Working Families Party, which is Democrats.
Right.
The Conservative Party and the Conservative Party, they didn't treat them the same way as they treated the Libertarians, who had just earned the right to be on the same stage as the Democrats and Republicans. That's wrong. I disagree with that. But everything else you said about the Libertarians, they're a bunch of they're like herding cats. That's just how it is. But they earned it. They should have.
They should have been able to continue to represent.
Yeah. Talking about the No Kings, we'll talk about that for a second. There's been a lot of talk, and there's this thing that's floating out there now. Chuck Schumer has talked about it. Brian Krasenstein has pushed this out there. We're seeing this being pushed out, that they got 5 million people across the country to come out on No King's Day. And it's the biggest protest that has ever happened. It's a mandate. And therefore, we should change things. Here's the thing. And I actually went over this because I saw Brian Krasenstein actually did that. And I got annoyed.
Yeah.
A lot. It's not showing this. Okay.
What was his basis for making that claim? Because I doubt very much, unless you're counting law enforcement and Marines as well as protesters, that they got anywhere near 5.
No, it's a completely made up number. It's completely imaginary. There is no evidence. There's no source. There's no way to prove that they got 5 million people. They're just. We don't even get even close to that if you count New York, LA. If you go through the biggest, bluest, progressive cities where, in fact, most of the protests, as far as I know, all the protests took place in the same places that had the BLM riots. They took place in the same places where people either had or tried to create autonomous zones. So like in New York City, it was in Brooklyn. What did they try and do in Brooklyn? They tried to create an autonomous zone. It was in Atlanta, Defenders of the Atlanta Forest. That's an autonomous zone. You had Portland. Well, there was an autonomous zone. LA, same thing. Austin, same thing. Colorado, same thing. So we know which type of people were doing this. And their numbers aren't that big. But I can't show it right now. It's not showing on screen. But what it is, I actually went through the numbers. And I showed this to Chuck Schumer. He hasn't responded.
Of course not. Unless you're a donor, never see the time of day.
No. And I showed it to on Twitter. I actually showed it to Brian Krasenstein as well. Again, big leftist. And I pointed out, I did the numbers. Let's assume that their imaginary made up 5 million number is real, which there's no evidence of. No way to prove that. But let's assume that their magical number is real. That isn't a majority of the American population. It's not the majority it's actually only about 1.5% of the American population. It's about I then whittled it down. If you go to the registered voters in America, puts them up to 2.26%. If you whittle it down to Democrats, 78 million people, then you get somewhere around 4.5%. If you whittle that down just to progressives inside the Democratic Party, then you get to 25%. That is the highest percentage you could possibly get. And it's the smallest fraction of the entire country. And it still isn't, even among, and that's assuming every single person who showed up was a progressive. You only get to 25% of the progressives in America, which are estimated to be about 20 million.
Right.
So there is no way they can say this is a mandate. No way they can say this is popular with America. They can't say that this is influential because their argument was, well, MAGA, you should say this is a mandate. You should change. No. I can say that Donald Trump got over 77 million votes. I can say that. I can say that he won with the majority of the popular vote, and he also won with the electoral. And Republicans won in the House and in the Senate. Those are mandates. That is a message. I can point to illegal immigration, mass immigration, and show you 60, 70% of America is agreeing with that. No one's agreeing with the No Kings. It was just a money-raising event. It was only there to try and make Democrats look like they're doing something.
Right.
When they have nothing. They no message. They have no plan. They just want to raise money so that they could have a better chance at the 2026 midterm elections. That's all this was. This was just a marketing gimmick. The same thing as what we saw in New York with Brad Landers when he got arrested by ICE. It was just about taking advantage of people. Emotions.
You know, in a way, it's almost like he thought, well, you know, if I get arrested, they may actually try to convict me. And that worked for Trump. It got him elected. Let me try that.
Well, Brad Landers?
Yeah.
No,
The
what he was
difference.
looking-
The
he was
difference.
looking- Go ahead, go
I'm being tongue in cheek, because really the difference would be if they tried to equate, Brad Landers being arrested, and it's like, well, it works for Trump, why doesn't it work for him? It's because Brad Landers sought it out. Trump did not, and had it foisted upon him. And people recognize the difference between that. We're not stupid.
Well, no,
A lot of us act stupid, but not all of us are stupid. And the majority of people that voted for the mandate of Trump deporting illegals and trying to reverse the damage that this country has been given comes from a place where we know what's happening to us, and we don't want it to happen anymore. And you've got people like Hochul, you've got people like Landers that want to continue to persist in this idea that they are somehow the anointed elite, that they deserve to rule over us as subjects, as opposed to us governing ourselves through them as sovereign citizens. And that's the big comparison, and it's not going to work anymore. Most people are just sick and tired of the bullshit.
Well, a big difference is, and by the way, folks, so when I say Brad Landers, most people have no idea who this is, because you really shouldn't. He's not important. If you're outside of New York City and New York City Democratic politics, you have no reason to know who he is, because he's inconsequential. But he's a mayoral candidate for the New York 2025 election. He's losing to the socialist Zoran Mamdani, and he's losing to the disgraced former governor Andrew Cuomo. So he's in 4th place out of 8, essentially. And he's trying to, and his thought was, this was a campaign gimmick, because we know for a fact he woke up that day, went down to the immigration courts for no apparent reason. There's no reason for him to have been there. No reason for him to go there. It's not part of his schedule. It's not something that he routinely does. He went down to the immigration courts specifically to pick a fight with ICE agents as they were executing warrants and, more importantly, deporting or attempting to deport illegal aliens. He saw ICE try to deport one individual, and he jumped into that event, thrust himself into that lawful action, and got himself arrested, detained. Realistically, we thought he was going to get arrested. He got detained and got released a couple of hours later. He did that because the progressives in New York, who are voting in the primary, Democratic primary, they like that, because fighting Trump and pro-immigration, yay, open borders. They want that. So that lifts up his image with those people, since he's not a socialist, and since he doesn't have $25 million in campaign funds previously. That's
right,
respectively Mamdani and Cuomo. So he needed to do something to make people even notice that he was in the race. So he got himself arrested. It was a complete gimmick. It's completely false. But there is one thing in that arrest that I thought was important.
What's that?
At one point, he did ask to see the warrant that the ICE agents were using, or one of the reasons why they were asking to detain and deport this illegal alien.
Mm-hmm.
No question, this is an illegal alien. They are a criminal. They are deportable. Right. But he asked for the warrant. They didn't show him the warrant, and then they arrested him because he was in the way. Okay. That being said, do I think they should have shown the warrant? Probably. But it was a stunt. And and Brad Landers was trying to create as much of a commotion as he could, because he was being photographed, to make it look as good for him as he possibly could, which would detract from, are we going to stop? Well, he's fighting us. Can't really show him a warrant while he's fighting us.
Right.
So there's that. But
Well, Frank,
that got me upset. Go ahead.
yeah, let's ask Frank. Frank, when
Yes.
when you were an officer, right? Can anybody just walk up to you if you're performing something on a warrant and ask to see the warrant if you're not
No.
involved with the warrant?
Nope. Nope. You have to be you should be at least an interested party involved with
Can barely
what's
hear
going
you.
on.
It should be you. It should be the interested party. Should be the person they're arrested.
It should be the interested party. This guy coming in there, he's not the guy's lawyer. If
Right.
the guy's here illegally, he's not even his constituent.
Right.
It's not even the area in which this guy represents. What this guy has any business going up and the guys doing their job and demanding a warrant and interfering with what they're doing, he's got no business being there.
Right.
No business being there whatsoever. This is
Okay.
a tactic that they're trying to use to get their name in the paper. The guy doesn't give a shit what this guy's status is,
Of
or
course
that
not.
he was being arrested. All he cares about is that he could get himself, a little bit of news coverage to get his name out there in the public for a sympathetic vote, and it's not going to work.
Yeah.
The news media are trying to make it sympathetic, and realistically, it's not.
Yeah.
They should call it out for the political stunt that it is. It is emotional manipulation. And that just tells you, and we see this a lot with Democrats, they love to manipulate people, and it should be called out. It is disgusting that he's reaching that low to try and raise himself up just because he desires more power. That's someone I'm glad that he's going to lose, because he's obviously willing to do
Anything.
anything to get elected. Yeah.
Right.
Well,
And
the only thing that I disagreed with your statement on, Vass, is that you said the guy's not a socialist.
Brad Landers isn't. He's a Democrat, has progressive leanings.
Then he's a socialist. There are no more blue dogs, and there are no more red dogs. The guy's got a hammer and sickle tattooed on his ass. I guarantee you, he's a socialist.
yeah, I'd say if you want to talk about what used to be a blue dog, Trump is a blue dog. I mean, he's like the moderate milquetoast of blue dog ever, but he's still he was a Democrat right up until the time he decided to run as president. And the only reason he didn't run as a Democrat was because the Democrats wouldn't let him.
Well, he actually started identifying as a Republican back in the early 90s.
Oh, really?
Kind of.
Yeah, he
Kind of, sort of.
He
But the
claimed
change
that
had
he
already
was, at
happened.
the time he was like socially moderate, fiscally conservative, identified more with Republican policies than he did Democrat policies. It wasn't until he really started expanding his empire outside of New York City that he started to see that more Republican policies were working better for him than Democrat policies were, not only working better for him but for the people as well. That's when he changed. That's when he changed. But
Right.
That's under the Clinton administration, and I'm not surprised when he started making that change, when he started expanding nationally and globally, the big push. And that's when Democratic policies were having more of an impact. And it wasn't as easy as a donation to the governor at that moment or the mayor at that moment would not be enough to smooth over all the layers of regulations, not enough to get past all the problems that their policies were creating. So I'm not surprised. And a lot of people realized it about that time.
I mean, and even now they continue to try to harp on sympathies and try to emotionally manipulate people. For example, with Hochul coming out talking about Landon's arrest and saying it's bullshit. The only reason she's mad, and she talks about rights, the only reason she's mad is because the federal government is infringing on her power, on her authority, and they're playing in her backyard, and she doesn't like it. She has no room to stand and talk about rights. A lot of these people don't. And why? I'll tell you. The example is Dexter Taylor. Here is a man who had his rights violated by the state government, is locked away for 10 years as a political prisoner for doing nothing wrong.
Hmm.
He did everything right. The moment he goes in to fight to make sure that his rights are heard, he's told he has no rights, that the Second Amendment doesn't apply to what he was doing, and that the New York Civil Rights Acts don't also apply. So the state not only denies access to the Constitution, which is illegal under federal code, because they're saying that their law somehow supersedes, and they're also ignoring and selectively enforcing their own civil rights acts that actually mirrors the Second Amendment and makes it more enforceable. So she doesn't care two shits about rights of the individual. She cares about protecting those who are in the same social strata as her, that are trying to compete in the same field that she lords over. That is where she's at. That's why she thinks it's bullshit that someone is playing in her backyard without her having any sort of grift to go with it or any sort of control. It's the same for Pritzker. It's the same for what's her face out in Michigan. What's her name? I can't
Gretchen
remember.
Whitmer.
Whitmer. It's the same for the lady in Arizona, the governor there. These people, they're all mad because their round table is being shaken up by federal power that is being exercised in their backyard, and they have no say in the matter because the people are sick of it and put somebody in that was going to do our will, whether they liked it or not. Now, they could still make the New York population's lives hell because they still have the ability to do that. But how far are they really going to be able to push when the people just say, you know what, you show up in our neighborhood, we're not going to listen to you anymore? That'll happen. It'll happen. Eventually it'll get to the point where the state police will show up at some point in time to try and do an unlawful enforcement, and they're basically going to be like, our sheriff told us we don't have to listen to you.
I don't think that's going to happen. People tend to, I mean, it's like with the shooting in Minnesota. Someone looks like a law officer. People tend to comply until they have extreme reason not to. I mean, it's one of the sad things about what happened with Minnesota.
Right.
And the shooting there, this nut job, because that assassin was a nut job. I know what his name is. It's been released. I don't care. He's a nut job. He used the trust that realistically everyone does tend to have about law enforcement and used that to his advantage. He's an evil, vile person who I want to see burn in hell. Actually, I don't want to see it. I just want to be happy he can burn in hell on his own. And I think he's a great example of why we should have the death penalty and why I think the death penalty should be by firing squad, because it shouldn't be pleasant. It should be painful. It should be rare. It should be extreme. Reserved for the worst of atrocities. But it should be something that is demonstrable of, like, you don't want to do this. You don't want this response. And I think that's what should happen to this individual, because they're evil and despicable, and there's no justification for what he did.
Yeah.
It should also be on pay-per-view.
Yeah. That would be
actually, if you want to do it, if you want to really do it the right way, it should be on PBS.
Well, that's how the Chinese did it. No, that's what the Chinese did. That's how they got rid of the 80% of China was addicted to opium. How did they get rid of it? They rounded up all of the opium dealers and they executed them. And they put it on all TV. You could not escape it. It was on radio. It was on TV. There was no way to escape the news that this is what they did to opium dealers. And they kept doing it.
Yeah.
And people stopped being addicted to it. That was the way they got people off of the addiction. Now, that's a little extreme. Absolutely. I'm not saying that we should do public executions per se, but I do believe the death penalty should happen. And I do believe it should be this firing squad for individuals like what we saw with the Minnesota shooter, because He's vile and disgusting.
Yeah.
And he broke all faith and trust with human beings.
Yeah. Now, for those of you in the audience who are familiar with George Carlin, if you think that having the death penalty is a terrible thing, you should go listen to George Carlin at some point and listen to his idea about what we do with really bad people. And I guarantee you that the death penalty would be kind compared to what people have discussed over the course of decades as to what punishment should happen to the worst of us as far as humanity is concerned. And even though George Carlin is a comedian, I seriously believe that he was, really thought this one through. Go look it up.
He was a sharp political pundit.
I tried to bring George Carlin up at work a couple of times, and I'm reminded quite often about how much older than my compatriots that I am, because my pop culture references tend to... All right, I'm going to ask you guys a question, okay?
All right.
No, I don't know him.
Oh, no. Vass, Dale, there's the same question. Ginger or Marianne?
Oh, man.
Oh, God. Well, that's... I would probably go with...
I would go with Ginger.
Marianne.
All right.
I like Ginger.
Dawn
each
Wells
of you...
much more attractive.
All right. Each of you could give me an answer.
Yeah, because I know the reference.
Right. Well, that's the thing. See, both of you could give me the answer. It doesn't matter what your answer is, because there's only two. It's a flip. It's one or another.
But they're both from Gilligan's Island.
But you gave me an answer.
Yeah.
7 out of 10 people at work cannot give me the answer.
Not surprised.
And Dalen, who works with me, who's in the audience right now, just
Who's that?
Who's that?
Who are they?
Now,
Dalen, that's from Gilligan's Island. Gilligan's Island TV show.
Now, I also asked the other burning question of our generation: Samantha or Jeannie?
Oh, come on,
Jeannie, of course. And of course,
I don't know, man.
Both those references. No, it's Jeannie. It's absolutely
no.
Listen. I
would have gone with Sam.
I absolutely adore Jeannie, but I'm a Samantha man.
No.
Yeah, I like Samantha.
No. You see, Jeannie was in the whole what is the Arabian belly dancing pants, and I loved it. She was great.
No,
I'm not saying she wasn't.
Great. But if I had to choose between one or the other, I would have gone with Sam.
No, because Jeannie was loyal.
No. Listen. You know what the difference was? Okay, each of them was absolutely beautiful. Okay,
yes.
Beautiful women. But you know what I think it is? Samantha was an equal.
Yeah.
Okay, she was an equal. She held the home together. She was the quintessential perfect wife at the perfect time in history at the time for that nuclear family. She was an equal to Darren, or Durwood, as
his
as
mother-in-law would say.
Durwood. Right?
Durwood, yes.
Now, Jeannie was subservient. Master this, master that. And I don't think a lot of guys, we might all say, it'd be nice to have somebody at my beck and call. But I think at heart, we want somebody to share our life with, to be an equal.
See, but that's
I like the fact.
Okay.
I like the fact that Sam stood up to her mother in defense of Darren.
Her mother, Adora. But here's the thing.
Who, by the way, 20 years before Bewitched came along, Agnes Moorehead was a good-looking woman.
Yeah,
she was beautiful.
I never saw her.
She was.
Oh, I never saw pictures of her earlier. But I will say this: for those who don't know what we're talking about and some of the things, if you go back and you see, there's a TV show, I Dream of Jeannie, at the same time period, which is late 60s, early 70s. There was also the TV show Bewitched. They made a remake of the movie Bewitched with the guy who did Elf, and it was complete crap, and they ruined it. They didn't understand what they were doing. But
yeah, they didn't understand the premise of it. How do you have Nicole Kidman, playing the actual witch on a TV show about a witch and a movie about it. What? They ruined that. They ruined the concept of it.
They didn't understand the underlying charm of it. But so that's the reference. Don't see the remake. See the original TV show Bewitched, and you'll see who we're talking about there. And if you look at I Dream of Jeannie with Larry Hagman and Barbara Eden, that's a TV show. Yes, they did a remake of that as well in the late 80s. Crap, don't look at that. Look at the original series.
No.
And if you look at that, you will see, actually it was the late 90s that they did the remake. But if you look at that, you will see that Jeannie does go through a metamorphosis, a transition.
She does.
But yet she was always loyal and she was always loving and she always had a good relationship. And here's the thing, those shows are beloved in ways that everything today is not.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's part of the problem with what kids are getting fed today. Those shows were core, essential, sharing relationships. They were about people living, nurturing lives. Today is about housewives, if I don't give a damn, and how they're screwing each other over for money. Materialism and waste and 90-day fiance, which is just dysfunctional people doing things because of money and attention. And no wonder they're failing.
Now for the audience though, this is going to shock you. So, and maybe Frank doesn't know this either, but I'm 43 and I still know your pop references. So what does that say about how I grew up?
Well, dude, listen, dude, I was the only kid. Listen, I was the only kid in Brooklyn in the 80s. Only kid in Brooklyn in the 80s who had rodeo trophies and listened to Elvis.
Okay, fair.
All right, so I was born 30 years old.
Yeah.
I was already an old man when I came out. I was already in the wrong generation. I hated teenagers when I was a teenager.
Elvis was always good.
Oh no, but I'm saying while everybody else was listening to, WPLJ, I was listening to CBS FM. They will,
My wife loves the shirt, by the way.
My shirt. It's one of my store, one of the shirts I have in my store, and they bought it.
Kids my age were watching Hanna-Barbera. I'm still watching, Warner Brothers. I was always watching the shit 10 years. So the fact that
Chris
you
Freeling and all those.
Yeah, I got 10 years on you, Dal, but the fact that you know the stuff that I know is just the fact that we're both old guys at heart.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
I live.
Mel Blanc was one of my heroes. Like I've always wanted to be a voice actor, right? So even when I was young, I was recording myself and everything. And Mel Blanc was one of my heroes. Like Marvin the Martian, Yosemite Sam. He did most of the
voice actor for cartoons.
Yeah,
people don't know.
Yeah, he did. He did every. I have upstairs in my office. I have the Warner Brothers print called Speechless.
Yes,
and it has all the Warner Brothers cartoon characters standing around an empty microphone with Mel Blanc's, epitaph underneath it.
Yep.
When he passed away in 1989, I was devastated as a kid because I idolized his voice talents.
Yeah,
how one guy could come up with so many different voices. And it was just, even our cartoons were better back then.
Well, yeah, but we'll think about, they made one of the most, I think it was up for an Oscar, in fact, one of the cartoons for short, it was for an Oscar for short film. That's Opera Doc. So it's the Looney Tunes, Bugs Bunny. Yeah. And this was something that the animators created on their own. So they were told by Warner Brothers at the time, we'll give you the money, but we won't give you the time. So if you want to do this, you got to do your entire regular schedule. And back in those days, they did everything by hand. So they had to fill out their entire schedule of regular authorized cartoons and shows, and then they had to squirrel away enough time to also draw this entire other cartoon just to prove that you could have opera music in animation, and that would be something that would be cultural and kids would love it and they would understand it. They said that they could, and the studio said, look, if you make it, we'll pay for it and we'll put it out there, but we don't believe you, and we're not going to do it. It's one of the most famous, most well-known short animations. It's classic. They were absolutely right, and it was groundbreaking. You don't have anything close to that today.
In fact, that's Opera Doc went on to actually, when they found it to be successful, the Rabbit of Seville comes right after that.
Yeah.
And the Rabbit of Seville is peak animation. Like, it was my favorite cartoon as a kid. Love it. It's like the marriage. It's basically loosely premised around the marriage of Figaro. Bugs Bunny shows up, and the music, the songs, the slapstick between Bugs Bunny and Elmer Fudd is just it's gold. Absolute comedy gold.
Nothing is better than watching Bugs Bunny and Elmer Fudd doing Wagner.
Well, you want to know
that was just the best.
Well, as a link to the Second Amendment, it's funny because a lot of the young people that I know that are involved in the Second Amendment movement will use the term FUD.
Yes.
For the guys that only like 1911s and bolt action rifles, the guys
Double barrel shot.
I don't need no way. And they don't understand. They call them FUDs, but they don't know where FUD comes from.
They don't know anything about Elmer.
Yep. They don't know anything. That's why. Here's a wonderful segue. That's why when we do the Ultimate Alpha Challenge, our national 3-gun match is called Elmer's Run.
Yep.
Because the rules of the contest are going to be that all the participants are only allowed to use revolvers, lever action rifles, and break action shotguns. There's no new technology. It's all the old technology. It's all the stuff Elmer Fudd had in his tool bag. That's what we're going to use for Elmer's Run.
Which
awesome.
I think
is pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. Yeah, that is cool.
Well, Elmer Fudd was, but again, there was such effort to do what we saw, like with Aesop's fables and history, where the original, the Grimm fairy tales, there were messages, there were life lessons in those stories. Some of them were very hyper political for their time, even, but they're done in a way that's intelligent and yet without being oppressive.
Yeah.
You don't get that anymore.
And you get appreciative. Like, you get appreciation for things that you normally wouldn't be exposed to. I mean, most kids, they get into contact with pop culture pretty quickly, right? But cartoons like with Looney Tunes managed to take something that was normally considered old and fogey-ish, right? Like classical music that normally was enjoyed by older generations that had grown up with that.
I loved it.
Right. But I mean, outside of the context of normal living, most of the kids at the time and even today, they don't really come into contact with classical music anymore unless they're exposed to it somehow. Cartoons at the time, because a lot of classical music was in the public domain and you could use it for whatever without having to pay any kind of licensing fees or rights, were used very often in cartoons as a musical backdrop. But they didn't just use it as filler. They also exposed entire generations to major composers. So, quick story. My dad used to hate to take me to orchestra practice because every time he would take me to orchestra practice, I would be like, I heard that and I would say like a Looney Tunes episode. And I'm like, I didn't know you guys played Looney Tunes music. And he goes, no, it's the other way around.
Yeah.
The music was made first, then the cartoon. But that was the point. It's like it takes something that normally would not be part of exposure, and it gives it it makes it palatable for people to learn and continue to know it. And then later on in life, you figure out, oh, it didn't come from Looney Tunes. It came from Wagner. It comes from Mozart. It comes from Beethoven. It comes from Tchaikovsky. But at the time, you see the cartoon, you think it's funny, and it stays in your head. And then later on, you learn the actual information. We don't do that anymore. Now it's you create this slop that basically is lecturing to your kids. That's not culture. That's like taking 24/7 infomercials and trying to shove them down everybody's throat. We don't want that. We want something to be entertaining, and if we happen to learn something from it on the side, bonus.
No, it's because we have indoctrination today. That's the whole point of almost everything. TV, entertainment, schools, indoctrination. That's the point.
Well, how many of us still know the words to conjunction junction and interplanet Janet and Uncle Bill on Capitol Hill?
That one I
don't know interplanet Janet, but I know the others.
Yeah, all right. Now, speaking of the Alpha Challenge.
Yes.
This is, if I can, where the hell am I? Why can't I?
Well, I see the picture.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. There we go. This is our preliminary blueprint for the Alpha Challenge. Yeah. What you're looking at is a map of the playground that is Sanctum 1791, America's premier firing range and gun club, located in near Surf City, North Carolina.
Yeah.
What you have here at the top, you'll see that there's two orange, like semi-loops right there.
Yeah.
With a bunch of purple dots on it. Each one of those is an equidistant track split up into 4 segments. One segment is pistol, one is rifle, one is shotgun, and the last one is a free run. Each one of these is the same distance, and there will be 50 challenges total put on this map. So you have 25 teams per day running on the left, 25 teams per day running on the right. Each competitor is going to will have 8 challenges to which they must complete 6. Until we get to the last guy, who'll have 10 challenges into which he has to complete 8. And then there'll be some bonus challenges at the finishing line where they can either add time to their score, which you don't want to do, or you can be successful in your challenge and reduce time from your score, which you do want to do. We are also allocating down here these 4 orange stripes down here.
Yeah.
This is going to be our vendors row, where we plan on having 100 different vendors come in. Rifles, pistols, shotguns, knives, electronics, gizmos, gadgets, accessories, you name it, we'll have it over here. This long strip down here is our rifle range, where people will be able to test and demo all the newest rifles that are on the market. This little box right here is our pistol range, which will be split up into 25 bays, where you can come down and test all the new handguns that are in the market. We've got ample parking. We've got the big restaurant there. There's a lake there, but there's no swimming in the lake because there's an alligator that lives there.
Wait,
all right.
Do you have the Florida Man challenge where you have to wrestle the alligator?
Well, I don't know if anybody wants to do it.
You'd have to sign a waiver. You'd have to sign a waiver.
Yeah, at least.
He's pretty big from what I understand. Now, this here, where you have the compass over here, next to it, you see this blue weird thing that kind of looks like the Star Trek symbol.
Your mouse is actually off. You're hovering over the blue square.
There we go. That's right here.
There you are.
Well, I have 2 mice on my screen.
Okay.
This area right here, that is Elmer's Run.
Oh, all right.
Okay, Elmer's Run is going to take place from a 12-foot tall elevated roofed platform to which every competitor is going to have a revolver, a lever-action rifle, and a shotgun. The course of action is going to be to engage 16 targets with your pistol at 30 feet from your standing location. Then move to your rifle, where you're going to engage 16 targets at 50 feet from that standing position. And then after that, you're going to have 8 birds that clay pigeons that you'll have to knock out of the sky with your single barrel break action shotgun.
Uh,
Fastest time is the winner of that.
Right.
That's Elmer's Run right there. So we're giving out
That's
little
awesome.
hints here and there about what's going to be, what the challenges are going to be, where they are, and what level of difficulty they're going to be.
Mhm.
But again, we are going to reiterate the top team that takes number one with the fastest overall time in the Alpha Challenge will win $25,000. The second place team will win $12,500. Third place team will win $7,500. And if you happen to be with whichever team you're on, if you happen to run your leg, your particular leg,
Mhm.
whether it be pistol, rifle, shotgun, or free runner, each of those will have a fastest time. The fastest overall leg wins $5,000 in each
Wow.
category. So the fastest pistol, rifle, shotgun, and free run, the fastest one, there will only be one prize, no second or third. There'll only
Right.
be one prize for each of those categories, will win $5,000. So if you happen to be the overall fastest time, and you happen to have all four of your times faster than everybody else, your team wins $45,000.
Nice.
That's like half of a Bradley.
Right.
I
So
could get a tread for that.
right, so the rules. There's a lot of rules involved in this thing because we're trying to make it as fair as we possibly can to try to level the playing field for everybody who's going to participate. There's going to be 100 teams allowed to register for this at 4 people per team. So there will be 400 people competing in the Alpha Challenge, which is a separate challenge completely from Elmer's Run. Elmer's Run, we're actually going to try and have sanctioned by one of our national 3-gun sanctioning bodies if they should so decide to do it, because none of them have ever sanctioned a match like this. So we have to do a little bit of arm twisting and convincing. However, if they don't decide to sanction it, well, that's okay, because the prize money is going to be good enough where anybody's going to want to compete. Because part of the sanctioning things is that if you're, say, like a U.S. Pistol Association, the United States Pistol Association, for you to get sanctioned to compete in one of their events, you have to belong to their organization, which means you have to buy a membership to get into that organization, and then you have to, then buy into a competition. Well, if you're not a member of that organization, there's no way for you to compete in a 3-gun match without, paying homage to that organization. So if they don't want to sanction this, you know what? That's going to be fine with us, because we don't think that we should have to have an organization that you should be a part of in order to try something new, in order to try and do something. Because there's a lot of good shooters out there that don't ever compete. And this is their opportunity to compete against some of the best in the world. And let's just see where everybody stands. Is it you? Is it your skill, or is it your gear? How much of them trophies, how many of them belt buckles that you have are there because you've got somebody who sponsors you $100,000 a year in guns and ammo and everything, and that's your job, to spend 10 hours a day at the range? Well, if you got if you've got a plumber out of Pittsburgh that happens to be a damn good shot, why can't he come down and compete?
Yeah.
And give it a go. Maybe, who knows? Maybe he's the best in the world, but he doesn't know. But you don't know because he doesn't belong to one of these organizations.
Yeah.
If we can work outside that organizational structure and bring more people into the sport and into our environment, the better it's going to be for the Second Amendment community, especially considering the one big factor that everybody's got to realize: nobody's got to bring a gun to this competition.
Right.
We are supplying all of the firearms. We are going to supply all the ammunition. Even if you don't own a gun, but you happen to be a great shot, but you had to sell your stuff, or you can't afford nice gear, or whatever the case is, you don't worry about it. You're going to be, for the Alpha Challenge, you're going to be using a top of the market precision built competition rifle, shotgun, and handgun. If you're competing in Elmer's Run, you are going to be using a finely tuned Henry rifle, Henry shotgun, Henry revolver. Best in the world. That's what you're going to be using. You don't have to own anything. All you need to do is have an outfit that you don't mind getting dirty and a good pair of running shoes, and you can come down and compete in this. Of course, you
That's
will have to be
fantastic.
required. You will be required to have ear protection and eye protection, though. That we are going to require every participant have.
And,
You have to
and
bring
you
your
said
own
there was
stuff.
you said there was an entry fee for the team, right?
Yeah, the entry fee for the team is $1,000 for the team. That's
For a
two hundred
four-man.
and $50 a competitor, which is $250 less than it is to compete in a standard 3-gun event.
Yeah.
So, and considering that the entire course, I'm estimating the least athletic group of people that I could put together to compete in this event would take 10 minutes. 10 to
Yeah.
12 minutes to complete the course, not including the shooting time. Just the physical end of the course is 10 to 15 minutes. For a bunch of pudgy fat guys with bad knees, could do this course in 10 to 15 minutes.
Not bad.
Now when you throw shooting in, so hey, $25,000 for a half hour worth of work while you're having fun, while you're meeting and hanging out with some of the best people in the world, and then have a barbecue cookout the night of the competition.
Yeah, that sounds
And
like
also,
fun.
yeah, it's going to be a friggin' blast. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be absolutely through the roof, crazy, nuts, and that's that. But that's my
That'll be
weekly
nice.
plug for the Alpha Challenge. More details will emerge as time goes by.
All right,
Oh, sure.
I've got to get going.
That's all right. It's 10:01. Vass, sign us out if you will with your plug for you where we can catch you this weekend.
Everyone can find me at No Soundbites Allowed. That's on YouTube, on Rumble, most of the social media, X. Every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we go into all of the issues, the big issues, and maybe some of the ones you didn't hear about that are affecting each and every one of us. I love to have feedback from people in terms of their chat, their super chats, their Rumble rants, asking questions and getting answers. And we've been doing that for now. Well, I've been doing political commentary 20 years. I've been doing the Sunday live stream 8 years now. So
Yep.
it's always great to have people around.
It's a great show.
And they can pick up the shirt you saw earlier. That's what you can get. You can also get that from the store.
He's got merch, folks. Get the Dragons merch from
Hey,
the den.
Dale, where can we find you, buddy?
Right here on Liberty First Foundation. I also have a channel on Grim Liberty on Rumble, but it's kind of quiet at the moment because I have a lot going on. So I haven't really been able to post there as much. I mostly am here, and I would encourage everybody to brush up on your civics, brush up on what it means to be a citizen rather than a subject and the responsibilities that come with that, because that's the only way that you're going to be able to learn to govern yourselves as opposed to being subject to an authority that really didn't get it legitimately. The authority for governance comes from the people, unless the people become so uninformed that then the government does whatever they want. And that's not how this country is supposed to be run. So join us at the Liberty First Foundation, $50 annually. Support the work that we do here on the Roundtable. It also would help us expand to do classes for constitutionalism and actual constitutional education. It helps to do fun things like the Alpha Challenge, that Frank is putting together. He can't do this by himself. Most of everything that you see that he's done so far has been Frank Johnson. Sponsored by Frank Johnson. Completely produced by Frank Johnson. So
well, speaking of which, I am taking a ride out Friday night, and we'll be spending all day Saturday at Sanctum 1791
nice.
with one of our major sponsors, 5150 Rifles, who's kind enough to agree to be one of our headline sponsors for the Alpha Challenge. It's their rifles and shotguns that you'll be shooting at the event.
Nice.
This weekend, I'll be going out there meeting with my buddy Steve Cleverly, and we will be demoing every single rifle in the complete collection that 5150 has amassed, including all of their brand new hunting rifles, AR platforms, so forth and so on. Now, I just took possession today of the brand spanking new Wraith 300 PRC, 5.5 pounds, titanium action, titanium barrel, carbon fiber throughout. Will be good for 1 1/4 miles with 1 MOA accuracy.
Wow.
Just took possession of that today. And I also took possession of their brand new AR-10, chambered in 6.5 Creedmoor, known as the Overwatch. I took that. If you go to if you go to the Range Report Facebook page, or you find us on Twitter, you'll see some photos that just came out. We'll be demoing all of these rifles this weekend. So the YouTube channel is going to be packed with all new content next week.
That's awesome. I'll have to make sure I catch that, because I've never seen a 6.5 Creedmoor like that. So that's gonna be cool.
Yeah, it's freaking cool. And I was laughing because I was looking at, there was like the 5.56 round was this, and then the 6.5 Creedmoor was like this, and then the 300 PRC was like this. I was like, well, maybe at $8.75 a round for that to go off.
For the
300 PRC, $8.75 a round to shoot that gun.
Wow.
Yeah.
You reload, right, Frank? You reload?
No,
of course.
No, I don't. I have people that do reload, but they're up in Binghamton, and I'm here in North Carolina. So I got to make some friends that reload here, but things are going smoothly.
Good.
But yeah, we're gonna have a whole shitload of brand new content next week. And next week we're gonna have some very big announcements as far as who our additional sponsors are. Our website is going to be up within the next 3 weeks, where we're going to have everything being detailed. We are not building any of the sets and challenges for at least 6 or 7 months for this thing. So we're actually producing a bunch of AI videos to kind of give you an idea of what the challenges are going to be looking like. So
very good.
It'll be cool. It'll be very cool. But everybody have a great time. Great time here. Listen, I'm Frank for the Liberty First Foundation. Listen, we're only coming to you guys on one channel tonight. For some reason, when I went to log on tonight to try and get to all other 10 channels, nothing worked. This is the only one we could do. I think we have we have to pay a huge premium in order to be able to broadcast for these things. And I guess our account must have went and nobody let me know that it was due. So I got a big bill that I got to pay to get this up and going. So I'll probably
$15 a year, guys.
Well,
cheaper than Netflix.
Hey, listen, I'm gonna if I start losing weight in front of the camera every week now, it's because I sacrificed my food for broadcast time.
Oh, I thought it was because you started an OnlyFans.
Oh, God.
What? What's wrong with the way I look now?
No. Think about it.
A lot of people like fat guys.
Think about it. You do an OnlyFans, and then all it is Frank losing weight. You could do the before and after journey, and you could be getting money the entire time. It would be great.
Yeah, that's all I need. All right.
Poor
guys,
Lori.
as always, we'll catch
I'm not visualizing it. I'm not.
I don't expect you to.
You are.
Now you are.
Krispy Kreme
All
donut. Oh.
Hey, just remember with Krispy Kremes, if I carry one donut in each hand, I can still deliver a dozen.
That's right.
Oh, God.
All right, for those of you with a visual mind, you'll figure that one out later. All right, guys, we'll catch you next week. You guys, as always, be safe and shoot straight. We'll talk to everybody soon.